Hi guys, welcome back to the Contact On-Site podcast. Today I'm super excited to host Bobby Hartshorne. Did you know that the construction industry has the highest rates of suicides globally? Working in the construction industry can be stressful and challenging. Today we're going to talk to Bobby, a subject expert on employee well-being.
Hi, it's so nice to be here. Thanks for having me on. As you said, my name's Bobby. I am living and working in the UAE. I've been based out in Dubai now for about 11 years and originally from the UK. And my profession, my personal passion is workplace well-being. And I run a small startup called WellWise. And we help to diagnose well-being challenges within organizations, which ultimately means performance challenges within organizations, and then to develop strategies around solving those. My previous role, I was in university space, and I worked in the student well-being space and purpose-built student accommodation. So a bit of a broad and varied career, but here I am. I'm very excited to be talking to you about well-being in construction.
Yeah, I'm super excited for this topic. I think it really doesn't get that much coverage. And what I'd like to know is, how did you get into this? Can you tell us a little bit about your journey?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it's fair to say my journey started back in university when I was a student, and I actually studied education. But while I was doing that, I was working with young people who, what we termed in the UK, were underrepresented in the UK. So they were not really getting a look in when it came to higher education in the UK. And so my job as part of my work as a student was to work with those people and encourage them to access higher education. And what I realized very, very young was that what your circumstances are, where you're born, the type of family you come from, etc., has a huge bearing on your chances and success in life. And that, I guess, has resonated with me all the way through my career. And I got into the student well-being space because it was an area I was really interested in, but also it was an area where universities were really struggling to cope with the rising demand on their resources from a well-being perspective. And I was working in student accommodation at the time, privately owned student accommodation. And I saw an opportunity for us as an industry to really support the universities and the students in that space. I carried on doing that until about the end of 2020. Obviously, for those of you who've just lived through the past few years, that was when COVID took its firm grip on us. And following that, I decided to turn my attention to workplace well-being, which is where I am working now. And really trying to understand what's going on in terms of well-being in organizations. How is that impacting employees, the bottom line, leaders, et cetera, And one of the areas that we're really focusing on in our research and our work that we're doing is construction, because it's one of the industries that's really, really struggling in this space. And it's really starting to show profound impact on both the people who have chosen that as a career, but also on the industry itself. So that's where I am, here in Dubai. And talking about well-being in construction.
Wow. Okay. What an interesting journey. It's interesting. You started off with the way you described it was, I guess, a little bit of people with unfortunate circumstances in the UK, right? And now you're moving on to maybe workers with unfortunate circumstances in construction. And I think it actually is, like, a lot of times we're really seeing, right, this pyramid structure of type of workers within the construction industry, right, where you have you have executives and you have engineers, and at the bottom of it is a really, really large base of what some people even call laborers, right? People who are working, and they're pretty much immigrants a lot of times. So it's really interesting that you started there, and professionally within the workplace, right? You're looking now at an industry that really has a lot of potentially familiarities or things in common with the reason you got involved. So it's exciting to kind of hear a lot more of your perspective on this. I'd love to hear a little bit about, what got you to look at the construction industry and kind of what are the challenges and opportunities in the workplace?
Yeah. Okay. So a few reasons that I, look, we support any industry, but the reason that we've kind of focused on construction and we've really put some energy and some effort into researching the construction space. One of the main reasons is that my partner actually works in construction. And so I have this beautiful lens into that world every evening when he comes home from work. I also, because I was in the purpose-built student accommodation space before this, there is a construction real estate element to that business. And so what I was seeing when we were developing properties and building was, a huge amount of stress. It didn't matter what country we were building in. It always seemed that everything was delayed, everything was over budget, people were stressed, there was a lot of shouting at each other and arguments and blame and all of this sort of thing. And it just felt like a really unhealthy place to work. A lot of peaks and really big lows. And then also, I suppose, working and operating in the Middle East and the Gulf region now, you can't live here and not see the construction world. I mean, it's absolutely everywhere. And so I started to sort of look at that sector and say, this is a sector that in many ways is really, really pioneering, building the latest buildings, coming up with great environmental initiatives, et cetera, et cetera. But where they are in terms of a human resource and a people perspective is frankly quite archaic. And as I started to do a little bit of digging into that and started to try and see what was going on in that space, I was finding an absolute wealth of information and research that's exploring this very issue and the threats that is putting in place, not just for the employees who have languishing well-being and suicide issues and mental health problems and lots of other issues, but also the profound impact that's actually having on the sector and the organizations that operate in the sector. And unfortunately, not everybody is joining those dots yet. Not everyone is realizing that some of the sort of antiquated, outdated human resource approaches in this industry are actually really holding the industry back. And there's just some interesting statistics. And again, sort of my background of working in the university space and then how do people choose their career. There's a really interesting piece of research that's just saying that the construction sector is becoming less and less appealing to young people. It doesn't have a great reputation. And so from a succession planning perspective, from a survival perspective, this is, a big threat to the industry. It also means that, people generally have quite high sick rates. There's higher chance of accidents. There's high obesity rates. This all impacts performance. And this is an industry with a productivity crisis, right? It operates on relatively small bottom line margins, and therefore productivity has to be high. And the way in which it's currently operating is really impacting those commercial objectives. And it's almost an industry that's leaving itself in the dark because there is so much happening. There's so much opportunity for them to evolve this space and to really benefit from it, commercially and humanly, that they're leaving on the table. And what it's meaning is that the gap between the industries that are taking those moves and the industries that aren't, like construction, the gap's getting bigger and bigger, which is making it even harder for them to catch up. So I like a big challenge. I've always taken on the big challenges, and I feel like construction is a space that I understand, not completely, but I've got a fairly good understanding of it, and I think it's a space where we can really add some value and make a difference, and see some great positive results across the board.
So you ended there kind of. You like a challenge, right? And you're really entering. I also, people a lot of times ask me, how do you get into construction technology? Why the construction industry? And usually my response is that I must have been dropped as a kid or something. Okay, I'm joking because it's a very challenging industry. That's the truth. Everyone who's involved in the construction industry develops a thick skin, for a lot of the challenges, and a lot of the reason why they need such thick skin is because of the well-being within the workplace, right? And because it's a very difficult environment, and obviously there's a lot of stress that's involved. The timelines are short, The responsibilities great, and so there's a lot that goes into kind of diving into this topic, which is why I'm very excited to have you on. Maybe like one of the things that would be interesting is kind of to dive in. What are the opportunities in terms of to improve the workplace environment, but also if there is even technology. And a lot of times what we do is we discuss innovation, which innovation is not necessarily a tech product, which is backed by IT. Rather, innovation is a new methodology or new process to work according to.
So much. Oh my gosh, don't even know where to begin. I think what's been so interesting, we did a piece of research. We interviewed about 20 senior leaders in construction in the GCC and the UK very recently. And essentially we were asking them, look, there's no secret about the well-being challenge in construction. No one's trying to pretend it doesn't exist. But what seems to be happening is that although we all know this is a problem, no one's doing anything about it, but the things that are being done about it aren't really proving to be particularly effective. They're very hit and miss. They're very sporadic. There's no kind of unity across the industry. There's no best practice model yet. And really, I think that's where the opportunities lie, right? The industry itself, one of the things that really reassured me about the industry when I was doing these interviews was that on matters of health and safety, the industry doesn't consider itself to be in competition with each other. They really help each other out in that space, and where they develop new initiatives and new innovations, they share them, because this is ultimately a matter of life and death, right? So that gave me a profound sense of hope. But where the industry is with well-being at the moment is that I can almost talk to any single person in construction, and I can say to them, what do you think about the state of well-being? And they'll say, it needs fixing, and I'm really interested in it. And so the first opportunity that construction has is it has a body of employees with the energy and the passion and the desire to make things better, or taking that advantage to fruition. Is it's not providing them with the platform to do that. So I think that's probably the first thing, is just, without even any kind of massive innovation or a massive need for technology, let's just start a conversation, a sector-wide conversation that really has the right people at the table who can drive meaningful change in this space, be that supported by experts like myself, but also having the voice of the construction industry there so they can, help us to understand the nuances of the industry. From a tech perspective, I think there's a lot of stuff happening just in the HR space in general. There's things like pulse surveying, AI integration to test cultures and things. And a lot of this kind of, I suppose it feels outdated now, but when you're talking about the construction industry, what you have to understand is that a lot of their methodology is about 5 to 10 years behind a lot of other industries. So when we talk about big data, which was maybe the topic 5 years ago for most other industries, that's kind of the topic that's now hit construction, and using big data within the HR function. I mean, often these companies are thousands of people large, right? They're huge. So they can have big data. They can spot patterns and trends. I think one of the areas that is on the radar for every industry, and this isn't just construction, is leadership development. I think a lot of people in industries get promoted into positions of leadership because they are technically good at what they do. They're technically a good engineer. They're technically a good drawer or a plumber or whatever it is, but they've never had any proper leadership or management development training. And the problem with that is that within construction, you end up with this situation where, well, I had bad leadership, so therefore it's okay if I pass bad leadership down the food chain. But it's actually completely counterproductive, because bad leadership creates stress for the leader and it creates stress for the employee. So I think there's a lot of innovation in the leadership space, in developing what we call human-centric leadership styles. And that's an area, as I said, that all industries are really looking at, and one that if the construction industry isn't looking at, they most definitely should be. And then in terms of other tech, I think there's a lot of inefficiency. There's a lot of wasted time. There's a lot of wasted resource in construction. And that creates, that's where those stress positions come. You know, we wait and wait and wait and wait. And then we've got so little time to actually deliver that we create this kind of like compression impact zone, where it's just frankly panic half the time, just go, go, go. And there's no room for leadership in that space. There's no room to take people with you because you just have to get the job done. And so for me, what I'm very excited to see is a lot of the technologies that you talk about. I've seen great procurement technologies. I've seen productivity technologies, time management technologies. These are the types of things that, although they feel like system changes and ways of working changes, will also have a profound impact on the experience that employees have in the workplace. And hopefully, if done correctly, free up that time, free up that headspace so that people can actually start leading, not just managing. And that's really the leap that the sector needs to start making.
Okay. I think that there's one of the interesting because I feel have a very strong correlation with workplace and well-being in maybe not directly, but kind of like a very kind of basic way that receives consequences is really throughout the entire communication within an organization, right? So communication and the way how it flows, I think that's like one of the big areas of where I look at a lot of technology in those spaces, and a lot of it has to do with how people communicate and how people work together, how people coordinate things. And it's just interesting, maybe from the standpoint of well-being, you know, what that means, why people, you know, maybe even, I think it's maybe even important to shed some light on why, what's so dire about the circumstances today, you know, on construction sites. I don't know, maybe if you could share with us a little bit, like, you know, what are the problems or one of the big challenges that people tend to face within the construction industry?
I think it's such a good point. I think there's two kind of things that spring to mind. If we think about construction in Western countries, so the UK, US, Australia, etc., what you have is huge, what we call long tail. So the small independent construction companies that end up on the sites of very big construction projects that are being overseen by some of the bigger players in the market, but they hire all these subcontractors, right? And one of the big challenges that happens is that even though you're a subcontractor and you're not directly employed by the kind of main contractor, you're still at the mercy of their culture. And you're still at the mercy of their communication systems, and you're still at the mercy of the way that whole site has been set up. And so as a subcontractor, you walk onto that site with very little control over your own well-being and your own ability to perform, because you're at the mercy of the situation you've walked into. Now, if that's a great setup, good luck to you and well done, that's brilliant. But so often it isn't. And so often they walk into bedlam. And then the sector has this kind of blame culture. So it's all about finger pointing. It's all about trying to put the subcontractor didn't deliver this, and well, they didn't do this, and the window guy didn't come, and all the rest of it. And so it's all about blame rather than about solution. And that just is a really negative communication starting point, because it starts from a position of threat and a position of I'm against you. Whereas actually what we're seeing in other industries is moving away from that and towards collaboration and towards a team effort, regardless if that team is coming from different functions or different companies. It's a much more collaborative effort, and it's so less about pointing fingers. It's just like, right, what are we here to do? We're not here to complain and point fingers, because that just slows us down. We're here to actually get a job done, and collectively, if we put all our resources into that, we can do that. So I think there's a communication breakdown that starts from that position of blame and from that natural setup of the long tail of subcontractors. And then I think there's a unique challenge in this region, the GCC region, and other regions that follow this sort of protocol, which is that the difference in terms of the language, the culture, and the hierarchical position that different people hold on site in this region is so much more stratified because of the very hierarchical nature of bringing in an immigrant labor workforce, often without English as a very developed language. And so simply their ability to communicate on site is massively at risk, right? And to be able to share their views or to raise a problem or to raise a risk, they don't have that capacity and facility, and they're often not considered to be of value to be able to even do that. And that's a really unfortunate place, because what the construction industry is doing is leaving talent on the table. There's no doubt that these people can see there's a problem coming, can see that there's there's a solution to that problem, but they don't either get given the opportunity to air that fear or that concern, and they don't literally have the language skills to do it because their manager is speaking a different language to them. So I think there's some different communications challenges that come across different regions, but I think you're absolutely right that the communication breakdown is really problematic from a well-being perspective, because it just creates stress, and then you have to deal with the fallout of that stress and the fallout of that miscommunication or lack of communication. And if I had to give the construction industry one tip, and I know probably there'll be people listening to this going, oh yeah, easier said than done, but if we can get rid of that blame culture and we can start moving towards a collaboration culture, that communication changes overnight. It becomes healthier, more productive, and frankly, more profitable. It makes absolute sense to move away from that. But that has been embedded in construction for a very long time. Things don't change that quickly, but yeah, it's so necessary.
Okay, great. So right now, one of the thought processes is that the construction industry itself has a ton of opportunity, right? And we discussed some of those. We discussed some of those challenges. How do you envision the future of well-being on construction sites?
Yeah. Do you know what? It's so funny you asked that. I was literally writing about this earlier yesterday, and I was having a conversation about it earlier today. I think today's leaders in construction are, many of them are 4 or 5 years away from retirement, right? Which means that their appetite to change is probably quite low, but they have an opportunity to leave a legacy, which is to succession plan and acknowledge that the world that they're leaving behind is not going to be the world that it becomes, because the nature of younger leaders, the mentality of younger leaders, the ambitions of younger leaders is frankly different. And so I think that for leaders in the top senior positions in construction now, their job is to be the bridge. Their job is to help the new leaders coming up with all their ambitions for well-being, with all their ambitions for a greater construction sector, to help them make that transition into those top leadership positions, and to do that gracefully and with gusto. For the ones coming through, oh my gosh, the unbelievable amount of opportunity for them is huge, because what I think that generation can do, sort of I suppose, if you want to put an age on it, I guess it's your kind of 40 to 50 category. They have the ability to rewrite the rules of construction, to envision what a career in construction can look like, and to decide and to kind of reimagine that and revision it and say, we don't want to see the construction die because it can't modernize, because it can't keep up with the value system that's changing in the workforce in general. And so what would an amazing career look like for somebody entering construction? And that would be a career that is healthy, that is profitable in terms of your earning capacity, that's rewarding, that feels meaningful, that doesn't have ridiculous, unsustainable levels of stress, that adopts new technologies, that embraces collaboration. And then to set about not just as individual organizations and individual leaders, but as an industry as a whole, to say, this is what we think construction can be. And we welcome people into that sector that want to help us go on that journey. And a very good comparison to this that leaders in construction can look at the moment is logistics in the UK and logistics in Europe. There is a massive shortage of logistics professionals in that part of the world. And so the sector has got together as a collective and is now almost advertising itself as an industry to consider for your career, a bit like the Army or the Navy or the RAF do. And I think there's a space for this in construction to step out of the madness of just that sort of day-to-day firefighting of being on a construction site and get into a place that is much more leadership-led, much more visionary, much more, I guess, ambitious. You know, that's what I think, ambitious. I feel like the sector has lost its ambition in some ways. It's got great ambition in terms of wanting to build amazing buildings and break records, but it's not got an ambition as a career, as a place to be as a human being. And I think that is going to be both its biggest threat and its greatest opportunity. And I can tell you now from the conversations that I've had, there is no shortage of amazing people working in construction now who have that vision in their mind, who have that imagination, and all they need is a little bit of a nudge and the permission to go and make it happen. And that's, for me, is super exciting. And I hope to be part of it. But even if I'm not, I hope to watch that happen because it's going to be cool.
Okay. Wow. Incredible. I'm super excited that we had an opportunity to discuss this topic. I think it's so important. And I think that, you know, one of the main audiences that we really have this podcast for is other construction professionals, to help them, inspire them maybe to see a different workplace, you know, looks a little bit differently. And it's good. Sometimes I think that some changes start outside the industry and within the industry. And I think most changes happen with both efforts, right? And so I think what's nice here is hopefully this will be inspiring for people to want to change and to search for it and to pursue it. And I'm very, very excited and happy that I had the opportunity to have you on.
Yeah, if you've been inspired and you want to know more about this, you want to talk to me about the research, you want to see just where generally the workplace wellbeing space is going in general outside of construction and where does construction fit in that, you know, I am so keen to talk to people who want to have that conversation with me because it's a really empowering and meaningful conversation for us to be having. And get in touch. I'm on LinkedIn, and I would love to hear from anybody in that space.
Hey, fantastic. Guys, like, comment, share. Leave us questions in the comments. Guys, thank you very much for listening. Bobby, thank you so much for joining.
Absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Construction workers are building our homes and infrastructure. Don't they deserve to work in a safe and secure environment as well? We believe technology can play a major role to ensure the safety and well-being of construction professionals. We urge you to help us spread the awareness and join us on our mission to making the industry safer, one technology at a time.